Cancun, and in November greeted 26-year-old Sativa Trans with perfect turquoise surf and long-awaited sunshine. After months of working in gloomy Washington, this trip was supposed to be a breath of fresh air. Sati smiled for the camera, sent bright selfies to loved ones, and seemed absolutely happy. But behind the perfect social media images hid a grim reality. She didn't know she wouldn't have a return ticket. On the night of November 27, 2021, a true nightmare unfolded behind the closed doors of her hotel room. Neighbors across the hallway were awakened by muffled thuds and furious screams emanating from the room. But no one wanted to get involved in other people's conflicts. Everyone simply tried to sleep. What exactly happened in those dark hours of the night in the hotel room? Why were her cries for help ignored? And how, in just a few days, a Mexican paradise turned into a deadly trap for a young woman? Sati Transu was born on May 19, 1995. She lived with her family in Spokane, Washington, USA. They lived there for a relatively short time. When Sativa was 12, the entire family moved to Cheney, also located in the same state. She would later call Cheney home, having always loved the area. She and Transu had another daughter, Michaela. The sisters were very close to each other, as well as to their mother and father. For many, they became the epitome of a happy American family. After moving, Sativa continued her education and integrated into the local community. She attended Cheney High School, graduating in 2013. Afterward, she decided to continue pursuing academic success, seeing it as the only path to a self-sufficient and successful life. She enrolled at Eastern Washington University and studied science there. She was especially interested in anatomy, medicine, and sports. Having combined all her passions, Sativa wanted to pursue a successful career in fitness and sports, perhaps becoming a massage therapist and opening her own salon. Despite her serious approach and busy schedule, Sativa was always very cheerful, good-natured, and positive. In high school, she was even voted the winner of a contest for the most infectious laugh. She graduated in June 2017. Afterwards, Sativa decided to move to Milton, also located in Washington State. She had big plans for her life. With her parents' support and the savings she had accumulated from her part-time jobs, Sativa planned to open her own beauty salon in the surrounding area. She chose this location because she believed there wouldn't be much competition. In any case, she needed experience, and that was still in the plans. In the meantime, she took a job at a similar establishment to gain insight into the work and business processes. Despite moving to an unfamiliar place, she quickly made new connections thanks to her outgoing and friendly personality. Her family supported her. Other girls and boys quickly joined her close circle. Sativa was in no rush to enter into a romantic relationship. She planned to start a family after she was confidently established and had built a foundation for her well-being. During this period, an old acquaintance named Taylor Allen caught the eye of the girl. They had met while she was working in Cheney, but that earlier encounter had been rather reserved. At first, they found nothing special in each other. Perhaps this was due to the vast difference in their personalities. While Sativa had always been adventurous, energetic, and active, Taylor seemed more reserved, quiet, and withdrawn. In any case, their new encounter in Milton was different. Now, they seemed more interested in each other. Initially, the young people's communication was lively. The guy courted her beautifully and was pleasant to talk to, so she quickly reciprocated his interest. She felt he was the right person to build a future with. This was gradually confirmed. What began as flirtation developed into years of a serious relationship. In November 2021, American families were preparing for another Thanksgiving. Sati hadn't seen her loved ones in a long time. She really wanted to visit her mother and father for the holiday. By that point, she hadn't seen either of them in a familiar family setting for a long time. By chance, her boyfriend planned a trip to Cancun, Mexico, for the same period. Sati was very unhappy with this coincidence and initially even refused to go, but eventually gave in to persuasion and agreed to go to Cancun instead of seeing her family. On November 25, 2021, they both boarded a plane and flew to Mexico. At the airport, Sativa was seen off by her sister, Mikala. She immediately noticed Taylor's behavior, which she found too provocative. He started another row for no apparent reason and only calmed down when he was threatened with not being allowed on the plane. It all seemed too sisterly, and she thought it would be worth talking to Ativa after their return from vacation to discuss his behavior. Her sister believed that Taylor needed to change, otherwise they weren't right for each other and needed time out to think things through. But for now, she decided not to spoil anyone's mood before the trip. As soon as Sativa arrived in Mexico, she immediately began messaging her family and friends. She posted dozens of photos on her social media pages on the very first day of her stay at the resort, sharing everything with her sister. 2 days of vacation passed in this state, when suddenly the messaging stopped. Up until that point, she had remained in constant contact, posting and actively communicating. But now several friends have contacted her sister, Mikala, claiming that Sativa has suddenly disappeared. She stopped calling and texting and stopped answering calls and messages. One of her friends shared something disturbing with Trance's family. According to the girl, the previous evening her friend had sent her a frightening message. He complained of a heated argument with Taylor, even suffering a serious facial injury. She required stitches. However, Sativa didn't even go into detail about how it all happened. She claimed that her boyfriend was very drunk and acting aggressively. At some point, she lost consciousness, and when she woke up on the floor, she saw a broken chin. Naturally, this friend's story greatly worried Sativa's family. Everyone began trying to contact her with renewed vigor. Unfortunately, neither she nor the boyfriend responded. The couple continued to ignore calls and messages. The couple didn't know exactly which hotel in Cancun they were staying at. All they could do was wait for a response. Almost a day passed in this state. The situation remained unchanged, so Transu's family assumed their daughter was missing. She still hadn't read the messages they'd been sending her. Early in the morning of November 28, 2021, Mrs. Transu received a call. She rushed to the phone, hoping to hear Sativa's voice. Unfortunately, it wasn't her daughter on the other end, but a representative of the American consulate in Mexico. He informed the mother and father that their daughter had been found unresponsive in her hotel room. No further details were revealed to the girl's family over the phone. But by this point, the police had already learned that the girl's death was not a coincidence. It was clearly a homicide. Her condition was terrible. The victim's family had little knowledge of her relationship with Ativa, but now, even the scant information began to piece together a frightening puzzle. Early in their relationship, the girl missed several key aspects of the guy's behavior. He always treated her with mistrust and jealousy, which escalated to paranoia. Taylor alternately believed that Sativa wanted to leave him and then suspected that she was pursuing a relationship with someone else. His thoughts were unfounded, but they gradually gained the upper hand. So he began monitoring her activity through her laptop. After every text message or call Sativa received, Taylor received an instant alert. However, he hid these traits well, stalking her covertly until he had gained complete control over her. To most of his and her circles, he seemed charming and pleasant, but behind closed doors, he became a completely different person. He acted discreetly, so Sativa didn't notice how deeply he was sinking into his total control. Having started monitoring her messages and calls, he quickly went even further, forbidding her from seeing her friends and then her family. Positive and cheerful Sativa didn't even notice how she found herself trapped within four walls. She was free-spirited, sociable, and active, but now she found herself isolated. Taylor had found the way to subtly manipulate her, so resisting his oppression was too late. Sativa was constantly under pressure from her boyfriend who, due to his paranoid thoughts, tried to isolate her from the world. Naturally, she began to feel uncomfortable. The situation only escalated, and over time, Sativa began to realize that her relationship with Taylor was harmful and toxic. Unfortunately, by this point, she was already under her boyfriend's total control. He knew just how much pressure he had to exert to get his way. The situation only worsened when, a year into their relationship, Taylor began using illegal substances. A background check revealed that he had numerous previous run-ins with the law, including drug distribution and possession. He'd done this before, but skillfully hid it from Sativa until it was too late. During his relationship with his girlfriend, Aaliyah was even arrested for drug distribution but escaped serious punishment. Despite the girl's family being quite distant from her, Michaela visited her regularly. Although the sisters had a warm relationship, Sativa tried to keep details of her personal life private, at least initially. Then fear set in. When Michaela visited Milton, she always saw the aftermath of her sister's boyfriend's psychosis. This could manifest itself in broken dishes, holes, walls, and broken furniture. However, Sativa always found excuses for it all. Michaela suspected that Taylor was to blame, but she couldn't prove it. Sativa was trapped in this relationship. She didn't like having to lie to her sister, covering up her boyfriend's behavior. Unfortunately, Taylor had a lot of support. The couple lived in a rented apartment, which was regularly visited by the young man's mother, Rosa. She was very controlling. Every visit from her was unpleasant for Sativa. The only saving grace was that she was primarily focused on controlling her son. But his girlfriend was also suffering. About a year and a half into their relationship, Sativa first considered breaking up with Taylor. But when she first brought it up, he began manipulating her, trying to elicit pity. He threatened to commit suicide if she left him. It worked, so she continued dating and living together. This was partly due to economic reasons, as she hadn't been able to immediately build her own business, and it was difficult to pay rent on her masseuse's salary. Now they began splitting the rent. Many believed Taylor and Sativa were unsuitable for each other, especially when suspicions arose that their relationship was far from ideal. Sativa's boss recalled Taylor's erratic behavior. He always seemed inappropriately short-tempered, sometimes making strange, unpleasant remarks. She became convinced she needed to keep a closer eye on him during an incident at work. Sativa asked him to help her assemble a desk for her at the salon, but Taylor was unable to complete the task. It wasn't particularly challenging, but he failed and he lost control, becoming so enraged that he grabbed a hammer and smashed the desk into pieces. Such outbursts were commonplace for him. He controlled himself, but his behavior always seemed dangerous. When the couple planned to go to Cancun, they had been dating for 3 years. She had tried to end the relationship numerous times, but Taylor always managed to keep her. The family really didn't want their daughter to trade Thanksgiving with her loved ones for a trip to Cancun with a toxic boyfriend. But she assured everyone that she had finally decided to break up with her boyfriend and would do so as soon as they returned. This reassured her parents and sister. Now all three had traveled thousands of kilometers to Mexico. The parents and sister wanted to know the truth about Sativa's death. Despite the language barrier, they tried to get an explanation from local authorities. They managed to find a translator who helped maintain contact. By this point, law enforcement had already gathered a considerable amount of information and were able to partially reconstruct the chronology of events. As it turned out, the couple was last seen in the evening of November 26 at a restaurant near the hotel. Witnesses noted that they were simply relaxing and did not argue. After dinner, Taylor and Sativa went to a local bar. There, they each had several drinks. The situation escalated when Taylor became intoxicated and began flirting with another woman right in front of Sativa. Although she had planned to break up with him, she was deeply hurt by her boyfriend's behavior. This sparked an argument that escalated into a conflict. Bar security noticed that 31-year-old Taylor was acting like a spoiled child. He threw a full-blown tantrum and behaved erratically, throwing things and accusing his companion of cheating on him. He was asked to leave the establishment. They left, but things didn't improve. His erratic behavior continued throughout the entire journey, even through the lobby to his room. It was so severe that hotel staff asked the woman not to let him out of the room until he sobered up. The couple ended up locked in their room. There, Taylor's behavior apparently worsened rather than improved. Reception received several calls from neighboring rooms. Guests reported hearing women screaming for help. When hotel staff went up to the 4th floor to investigate, they found him with a deep gash on his chin. The girl claimed she didn't remember how it happened. Given her 3-year history of toxic relations with Taylor, her sister later suggested a fight had gotten out of hand. Curiously, when Sativa went to the lobby for a doctor's appointment, Taylor was nowhere to be found. It turned out he had jumped out of the window and was lying on the lawn under the air conditioner. When security approached him, he claimed he was fine but refused to return. He hadn't sustained any injuries, but he was intoxicated and rambling about cheating and breakups. With difficulty, he was brought to his feet and brought to the lobby. He soberly refused to go up to the 4th floor and waited for the girl there. As the doctor who stitched up Sativa's wound later testified, the girl continued to maintain that Taylor had nothing to do with the incident. She said they truly loved each other. The girl insisted she simply fell and didn't want to attract police attention. The doctor suspected it was no accident and even offered to move out and rent a different room to avoid risk, at least until the man sobered up. But the victim refused. Mikala later believed that the language barrier played a significant role in the incident. The doctor stitching Sativa's chin wasn't 100% fluent in English. His broken English was rather poor. Because of this, the girl might not have understood what he was talking about and simply made excuses to end the conversation as quickly as possible. In any case, after receiving medical attention, Sativa returned to the hotel where the drunk man was waiting for her. The couple was moved to a different room because Taylor was still in a state of insanity. He and Sativa were given a double room on the ground floor, fearing that another jump from the balcony could end tragically. As it later became known, a woman's cries for help and numerous muffled thuds were heard from this room as well. All the neighbors heard them, but no one called the front desk. Further investigation revealed that the hotel staff should have heard it too, as it was happening on the ground floor. People were likely simply scared, as Taylor was a strong man and didn't want to interfere. Why the police weren't called remains a mystery. In any case, after a while, everything died down. In the morning, Taylor took a shower and went to the front desk, claiming his girlfriend was unconscious in the room. He believed she might have had too much to drink the night before and was still suffering from a hangover. When security entered the room, they found her lying face down on the floor next to the bed. She was unresponsive. It was immediately clear why. Her body was cold and stiff. Her entire skin was covered in abrasions, bruises, and blood. Whatever happened there that night left numerous scratches and injuries. Even the security guards, inexperienced in criminal matters, realized that the injuries could only have been caused by a brutal beating and struggle. The girl's bag with her belongings was still slung over her shoulder. It seemed as if she had tried to escape the aggressive man from the room, but simply didn't have time. Arriving paramedics confirmed that Sativa had long since died. Her body was taken for an autopsy. Even a cursory glance revealed that she had died violently. The girl had been so severely beaten that it was difficult to identify the person lying on the table just by their face. In addition to the marks of the beating, the victim had numerous defensive wounds. She had resisted her attacker, but the disparity in strength was too great, making it impossible to save her life. The difference between Sativa and Taylor was truly significant. While the girl weighed 65 kilograms, her boyfriend weighed 120. Naturally, the most she could have inflicted on him was a couple of scratches. However, this was enough to find physical evidence pointing to the killer. Upon learning of their daughter's tragic fate, her parents and sister were devastated. Even now, they can't fully believe what happened. The entire family blamed themselves for not doing anything to save their loved one from the clutches of a tyrant. By the time the body was delivered to coroner's office, the police had already identified the culprit. This wasn't difficult, as numerous witnesses pointed to Taylor Allen, who was calmly having breakfast at the hotel. He was immediately arrested on suspicion of murder. Naturally, the Transu family wanted the case to be investigated in the United States. They hoped to transport the Sativa's body to the States, conduct another autopsy, and then bury the remains in their homeland. However, all this required significant expenses and time. It was not possible to immediately return the deceased to her homeland. This prompted Michaela to organize a fundraising campaign. Transportation was expensive and required a significant amount of money. Furthermore, the family faced a struggle for justice. Bureaucracy proved the most significant challenge, as the murder occurred in Cancun and was initially handled by local law enforcement. Overcoming the language barrier was even more challenging, as most of the Mexican population speaks Spanish, a language the Transu family simply didn't understand. The challenges were partially resolved by December 8, 2021, when Sativa's parents hired a qualified lawyer. He personally discussed the situation with the prosecutor, looking for loopholes. This allowed the body to be returned to the United States the following day. However, finding a way to try the detainee under strict American law was impossible. He faced a hearing in Mexico. The Transu family feared Taylor would receive a short sentence there. Everyone was constantly pressuring the country's law enforcement agencies, but the law has always worked very slowly here. It was a small consolation when the Transu family was assured that the case would be transferred to one of the strictest judges in Mexico. By April 2022, the trial had still not moved forward. Taylor's defense team stalled for time in every way possible. His lawyer requested 2 additional months for the investigation. The request was granted. Several more followed, with similar decisions or Russians. It seemed the situation was about to be resolved, but even after 2 years, no changes had been made. The prosecution had been asking for the maximum possible sentence, which was 50 years in prison. Taylor wasted no time. The young man ended up in a Mexican prison and became a member of a cartel. Naturally, he was supposed to carry out the orders of the criminal group committing crimes against other prisoners, but no information on this could be found. Presumably, he was distributing substances, something he had already been involved with in the United States. All this was intended to help buy his freedom or escape from prison. When all this became known to the Trans family, they worried that their daughter's killer might get his way and this would allow him to go free. In this case, he could have disappeared into the vastness of Mexico and avoided punishment altogether, or he could have even taken revenge on them. While the relatives of the deceased continued to fly back and forth between the United States and Mexico, trying to understand what was going on, another crime was committed against them. Michaela began to suspect that Taylor's mother had broken into the apartment where her boyfriend lived with Sativa. Numerous items, including the deceased's valuables and savings, had disappeared. Michaela's suspicions were not unfounded, as the boyfriend's mother, Rosa, was the only woman who had free access to the apartment in the complex during her life, so she knew where everything was. When the investigation began in Mexico, Rosa repeatedly tried to gain entry. But since the premises were not rented in her name, she was refused entry. Michaela concluded that Taylor's mother had succeeded in her deception. Interestingly, after the break-in and the loss of her belongings, the persistent calls from Rosa demanding entry to the apartment ceased. Michaela also knew that the relationship between her sister and Taylor's mother was extremely strained. Sativa often complained that Rosa was completely controlling and manipulating her boyfriend, including herself. Rosa even offered to let him move into her duplex permanently after returning from Cancun. Unfortunately, there was no physical evidence against Rosa. Michaela believed that not only her son, but she too was involved in the crime. Despite the family's concerns about the Trans, although preparations for the trial were delayed, the trial finally began. This occurred almost 5 years after Sativa's death. During this time, her family regularly flew to Mexico for hearings that seemed endless. It was only in early June 2026 that a guilty verdict was handed down. All of the lawyers' attempts to obtain a leniency failed, so Taylor Allen was found guilty of femicide. He received the maximum possible sentence of 50 years in prison. Afterward, the victims' relatives told reporters about the difficulties they had endured over the years. They breathed a sigh of relief after the killer went to prison. The parents believed that Sativa's death had finally been avenged. In memory of her beloved sister, Michaela constantly carried out social work, which she continues to do today. She informs women how to keep abusers out of their lives. What should they do if it does happen? How can they find support and assistance? In addition to this work, she and her relatives annually organize the Sativa Memorial Run. Funds raised from this athletic event go to support victims of domestic violence, as well as families who have suffered at the hands of violent men. Taylor Allen is serving his sentence in a Mexican prison. There are no details about his fate. For 5 long years, Sativa's family lived in a nightmare, torn between courtrooms in a foreign country and the empty room of the house where her laughter once echoed. Justice ultimately prevailed, but no sentence, not even the harshest in the world, can bring a mother back her daughter, her best friend's sister. Sativa flew to Cancun for a breath of freedom, that this would be their last trip. She found the strength to leave, but the monster she called a beast simply didn't give her a chance to survive until morning. This tragedy leaves behind one terrifying question that each of us should ponder. If the people in the neighboring rooms on the first floor had called for help that fateful night, would Sativa be alive today? If you liked my work, subscribe to the channel and support this video with a like. Nikki, let's discuss this story in the comments. Don't forget to subscribe to my Telegram channel where I publish interesting crime news daily. The link will be in the video description. Thanks everyone, and bye.